Welcome, dear viewers, to a tale unlike any other. Beaches are often seen as places of relaxation, joy, and escape from the mundane realities of daily life. However, what if I told you that beneath the golden sands and the soothing sounds of the waves, there are hidden horrors waiting to be uncovered? This is a tale of such hidden horrors, a disturbing story that took place on an otherwise serene beach, forever tainting its beauty with a darkness that no amount of sunshine can dispel. Sarah Thompson had been looking forward to this beach vacation for months. She and her friends, Mike, Emily, and Jake, had rented a beach house in a small coastal town known for its pristine beaches and tranquil atmosphere. The group arrived on a sunny afternoon, the salty breeze and the sound of the waves immediately putting them at ease. The beach house was perfect, nestled among sand dunes with a panoramic view of the ocean. They quickly settled in, unpacking their bags and changing into their swimsuits. The plan was to spend the rest of the day soaking up the sun and enjoying the water. As they made their way to the beach, they noticed an old man sitting by the entrance to the beach, his eyes fixed on the ocean. He looked up and gave them a toothless smile. "Be careful out there," he warned. "The sea has secrets it doesn't share easily." The group laughed it off, thinking it was just the ramblings of an old man. They had no idea how true his words would turn out to be. After a long day of swimming and sunbathing, the group returned to the beach house, tired but happy. They decided to have a barbecue on the deck, enjoying the cool evening breeze and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. As the night wore on, they sat around a fire pit, sharing stories and laughter. Mike, always the prankster, suggested they tell ghost stories. Emily rolled her eyes but played along, telling a story about a haunted lighthouse. When it was Jake's turn, he hesitated. "I'm not sure if this is a ghost story, but it's something that happened to my uncle when he was young. He used to visit this very beach every summer. One night, he saw a woman standing by the water. She was crying, and when he approached her, she vanished into thin air. The next morning, they found her body washed up on the shore. She had drowned, but no one knew how." The group fell silent, the mood suddenly turning somber. Sarah shivered, feeling an inexplicable chill. She glanced towards the ocean, the darkness making it seem more menacing than it had during the day. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. She decided to take a walk along the beach while her friends were still asleep. The sky was just starting to lighten, the first rays of dawn casting a golden glow on the water. As she walked, she noticed something partially buried in the sand. Curious, she approached and started to dig it out. It was a small weathered chest, covered in barnacles and seaweed. She tried to open it, but the lock was rusted shut. She decided to take it back to the beach house to show her friends. By the time she returned, they were all awake and having breakfast. She placed the chest on the table, and they all gathered around it, intrigued. Mike grabbed a knife and managed to pry the lock open. Inside, they found an assortment of old photographs, letters, and a locket. The photos were black and white, showing a young couple on the beach, smiling and happy. Emily picked up one of the letters and began to read it aloud. It was a love letter, written by the man in the photos to the woman. As she read, the air grew colder, and the sound of the waves outside seemed to grow louder. That night, strange things started to happen. Sarah woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of whispering. She sat up, looking around the dark room, but saw nothing. The whispering continued, growing louder and more insistent. She got out of bed and walked towards the source of the sound. It led her to the living room, where the chest sat on the coffee table. The lid was open, and the letters and photographs were scattered across the table. As she stood there, the whispering stopped. She felt a sudden, intense cold, and the hair on the back of her neck stood up. She turned around quickly, expecting to see someone standing behind her, but the room was empty. She gathered the letters and photos, placing them back in the chest and closing the lid. As she did, she noticed something strange. The locket, which had been inside the chest, was now hanging on the handle of the front door. The next morning, Sarah told her friends about the strange occurrences. Mike, ever the skeptic, brushed it off as a figment of her imagination. But Emily and Jake were more inclined to believe her, especially after hearing about the woman Jake's uncle had seen. They decided to visit the local library to see if they could find any information about the couple in the photographs. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hargrove, listened to their story with a grave expression. "You found the chest, haven't you?" she asked. "I knew it would resurface one day." She told them the story of Margaret and William, a young couple who had lived in the town many years ago. They were deeply in love, and William had given Margaret the locket as a symbol of their love. But one stormy night, Margaret went missing. Her body was never found, and William, heartbroken, disappeared shortly after. Mrs. Hargrove explained that the chest had been Margaret's, and it was said to be cursed. Anyone who found it would be haunted by the spirits of Margaret and William until the locket was returned to its rightful place. Determined to put an end to the haunting, the group decided to return the locket to the beach. They went to the spot where Sarah had found the chest and buried the locket in the sand. As they did, the wind picked up and the waves grew rougher. The sky darkened, and they heard the faint sound of whispering carried on the wind. They hurried back to the beach house, hoping that their actions would appease the spirits. That night, the atmosphere in the beach house was tense. They stayed up late, waiting to see if the haunting would stop. But as the clock struck midnight, the strange occurrences began again. The lights flickered, doors slammed shut, and the whispering grew louder and more insistent. Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She ran out of the beach house and down to the shore, her friends close behind. She stood at the water's edge, shouting into the wind, begging the spirits to leave them alone. Suddenly, the ocean seemed to part, revealing a figure standing in the shallow water. It was Margaret, her eyes filled with sorrow. She held out her hand, and Sarah saw the locket dangling from her fingers. Sarah stepped forward, taking the locket from Margaret's hand. As she did, Margaret smiled sadly and began to fade away. The wind died down, and the waves grew calm. Sarah and her friends stood in silence, realizing that they had finally put the spirits to rest. The next few days were peaceful. The strange occurrences stopped, and the beach house seemed to return to its normal state. Sarah and her friends enjoyed the rest of their vacation, but the experience had left them shaken. They decided to leave the chest and its contents buried on the beach, hoping that it would remain undisturbed. As they packed up and prepared to leave, they made a pact never to speak of the events that had transpired. Years later, Sarah would often think back to that summer. She and her friends had drifted apart, each of them dealing with the experience in their own way. But the memories of the haunting remained vivid in her mind. She would occasionally visit the beach, standing at the spot where they had buried the chest. She would feel a sense of peace, knowing that the spirits of Margaret and William had finally found rest. One summer, Sarah decided to take her own family to the beach. She wanted to create new, happier memories to replace the haunting ones. Her children played in the sand, laughing and chasing each other, while she and her husband relaxed on the shore. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the water, Sarah felt a sense of contentment. But as she looked out at the ocean, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Standing at the water's edge was the figure of a woman, her eyes fixed on Sarah. It was Margaret. Sarah stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She walked towards the water, her eyes never leaving Margaret's figure. As she got closer, she could see the sorrow in Margaret's eyes, the same sorrow she had seen all those years ago. Margaret held out her hand, and Sarah saw the locket once again. She realized that the spirits were not at rest after all. The locket had somehow resurfaced, and with it, the curse. Sarah took the locket from Margaret's hand, feeling a sense of dread wash over her. She knew she had to do something to end the curse once and for all. She decided to seek out Mrs. Hargrove, hoping the old librarian could provide some answers. Sarah and her family left the beach that day, the locket safely tucked away in her bag. She contacted Mrs. Hargrove, who was now retired but still living in the same town. Mrs. Hargrove agreed to meet her, and they sat down to discuss the situation. Mrs. Hargrove explained that the locket needed to be returned to its rightful place, a place where Margaret and William's spirits could finally find peace. She suggested a small, secluded cove a few miles down the coast, a place that had been special to the couple. Sarah and her family made their way to the cove, the locket in hand. They found a secluded spot among the rocks and dug a small hole, placing the locket inside. As they covered it with sand, the air grew still, and the sound of the waves seemed to fade away. Sarah felt a sense of closure as they left the cove. She hoped that Margaret and William had finally found the peace they deserved. Years later, Sarah would reflect on the events that had transpired. She and her family continued to visit the beach, creating new, happy memories. The haunting had finally ended, and the curse of the locket was no more. But every now and then, as she stood on the shore, she would feel a presence watching over her. She knew it was Margaret and William, their spirits finally at peace, forever grateful for the kindness she had shown them. And so, the disturbing true beach horror stories came to an end, leaving behind a legacy of love, loss, and redemption. The beach, once a place of terror, had been transformed into a sanctuary of peace and serenity, a testament to the enduring power of love and the importance of finding closure.